I would like to share with you a story that is really about Good Samaritans. What you're looking at here is an image of a stained glass window that just happens to be in a small church in a small community of Massey's Mill, and that window symbolizes a lot. It was already in the church long before I ever recognized the Good Samaritans that came. The Good Samaritans that came are Mennonites, and they came to help a community, a county that was devastated in 1969 during Hurricane Camille. Massey's Mill is a small community in a fairly narrow valley. There was a road through this valley, probably because the water was fairly shallow and easy to ford. You could get up onto the ridges on either side fairly quickly to get up out of the mud. Soon a family built a mill in the area, and over the years a small community built up around that mill and continues today, although quite diminished from its heyday in the early 1900s. This narrow valley, which was a great place to be, presented some perils to the people that lived in this area. While this narrow valley was a great thing for the road trying to cross the river and get out of the mud, in a high water event it is actually the opposite. It constricts the flow, causes the flow to be more rapid, and causes a lot of damage. As you can see here, the buildings are just stripped and gone. A few remain, but many are just gone. Debris is piled against things, and it just finds ways to go through the valley, in between things, in odd ways that rivers do, yielding little mercy on anybody in the way, anything in the path. Note the two trees in the upper left. They play a significant role. At the base of them you can see a little bit of debris piled up. This is an on-ground view of the same area. You can see the foundations are laid bare, and the water's been through and just taken everything. There's debris piled against the old store building, and luckily it was far enough just to the right of the channel that it did not damage this building too much. Notice the two trees above the church. They did play a significant role. To the left of the church, against the far tree line, is the main river channel. The water did not stay over there that night. It jumped the banks of that main channel and came down through the center of the valley between the store and the church. This is a close-up image of the store with the debris piled against it. Some debris caught in the road there. Obviously, a couple of these vehicles weren't there that night. In the left, above the church, upstream of the church, you'll see the two trees. There's debris around the base of these trees, although it's not a large pile of debris. It was there, and it did deflect some of the flow. The church on the upstream side is a gable end. It's got three arched windows and a small oval window above them. All three of those windows were completely broken in by the floodwaters. And small debris and a lot of mud went into the church, although the church itself did not get a tremendous amount of debris piled up against it, causing the potential for that church to wash away. as you can see here, debris was piled pretty high. Inside the church, flood levels were 5.5 to 6 feet high. But on the outside, in the low areas to the edge of the church and back on the riverside, debris can be seen commonly in trees up to 20 feet above the surrounding ground. Debris just trapped against other buildings and caused such a resistance that the force was too strong and washed things away. This is another view of between the store and the church, where everything you can see, if there wasn't something to trap debris, it just stripped it clean. To the right of the church, you can see Mr. Bowling's house. Mr. Bowling was one of the lucky ones. He might have survived had he stayed in the house, but as the waters rose, some folks knew he was there, and they took him to higher ground earlier before the waters got high. Debris piled against the upstream side of his house. These two trees didn't block any of the flow. They did, so a tremendous amount of stuff piled up against his house. And that resistance to the direction of flow of water pushed so hard against the house that it shoved the house completely off the foundation, damaging the house to the point that it could not be rebuilt or saved. This is an image of the two trees above the church. They had a lot of debris piled around them. There was a slight road embankment that you can barely see going across to the left of the picture. And that road embankment deflected some water, and the trees caught a lot of debris and limited the pile of debris on the upstream side of the church. In this image, the yard has a few of the pews and furnishings from inside the church brought out on the lawn, trying to get them cleaned up and ready for reuse or salvaged in some way. All the windows there on that gable end under the small circular window were broken out, and many of the other windows in the church were also broken out. When the windows under the small circular window broke, much small debris and mud and floodwaters rushed into the church, piling everything against the downstream end of the church that is viewed here. Windows are broken out, organ is washed away. Everything is in shambles inside the building as well as outside. The one blessing is that the Good Samaritan window survives at the end of the church. Next arrive our Good Samaritans, Mennonites from all over the eastern United States, first from Waynesboro and Stanton, and then extending out to other areas all the way up into Pennsylvania and eventually Canada. All over the United States come to give assistance to this devastated community. Here, many volunteers gather in Livingston, the county seat, at command post to receive assignments to go out all over the county to do varying tasks. The initial tasks were all focused more on search, rescue, recovery. Soon we learned that most people that weren't found right away, people that were missing for 24 hours or more, were eventually considered fatalities. But it didn't matter what the mission was. The Mennonites were at the ready in large numbers to help this devastated community. Searching was not simple. Debris piles were large, tangled with mud, trees, structures, buildings, wood, you name it, rocks. It was all there. You had to work your way through it. You had to pull those things apart. You had to find any and every trace and any and every person that you could. Mennonites were superb at this task and were valued parts of this recovery team. Soon after, disaster services such as the Red Cross came and offered aid and assistance. They funded a lot of reconstruction, and the Mennonites were at the front of the line volunteering to help. In this image, you see the farmer went to check shirt, Mr. Boland, whose house was destroyed next to Grace Church, is there for a meeting, and his house will be rebuilt. Rebuilt it was from the ground up. Foundation walls were dug by hand. The Mennonites were there to do it all. From the foundation to the rooftop, electrical, plumbing, you name it, they could do it, and they did. One of the things that was damaged during the flood on the back of the parish hall of Grace Church was a small bathroom. That bathroom was basically, it was an addition to the parish hall, so it was detached readily and pushed away by the flood. The Mennonites were in the middle of this rebuilding, bringing Grace Church back to being able to assist others. Grace Church became a support center, if you will. Anytime, day or night, all through the day, 3 meals a day, food was there, available. You could go, have a meal, get something to drink, and recover a bit before you continued on with your next task. Most of that food was prepared by the Mennonites. The Mennonites came to the church. They worked there all day long. They went out on task. The ones that weren't preparing food went out on cleanup and rebuilding task. Others stayed there and made sure the food stayed prepared. At any time you could come in and have a meal. The small church would house and seat 30, 40 people at a time, and oftentimes at lunch you would see that many there. They would come from all communities, rescue squads and fire departments from all the surrounding counties and cities. The Mennonites fed them. They took care to make sure that everybody was given a good meal, a blessing, and sent on their way. The Mennonites lived in the church. In the evenings, after supper, they would move all the tables aside, set up cots, and they lived there, 15, 20 of them at a time. Day in and day out, as they came and volunteered, they stayed there in homes and other areas around the county, but in Grace Church, right there in the parish hall. 15 or 20 people lived for months, maybe 5, 6 months or more, in the church, just helping people and doing what they could to bring our community back together, asking nothing in return. So our little church, our community, town of Masters Mill, greater county of Nelson, and surrounding areas, owe a great debt of gratitude to the Mennonite community, to all the many people that came and helped. Our church eventually rebuilt all our stained glass windows. The good Samaritan window is still there. And we put a new window in. honor of all the people that perished. But our great debt of gratitude is to the Mennonites. They are the Good Samaritans.